Live mic, very dangerous. Good evening, everyone. Okay, we last time, again, using the Tibetan tradition of mental development, and I've been using it as a roughly parallel text, the Torch of Certainty. So what's the difference? Well, this one is from the Geluk tradition, which is Dalai Lama. The came out of the Kadampa tradition, it's called, of stemming from the great Indian master Atisha, who came to Tibet with this, what's called the second unfolding of the Dharma teachings in Tibet from India. So these are called Sarma, or new teachings. Includes the Geluks, the Sakyas, and the Kagyu. So the Kagyu, this book, The Torch of Certainty, this is a text with commentary by Jamgon Kongtrul, who was one of the great Kagyu lamas in the early and mid 1800s. So it was about this time that Tibetan lamas got together and were concerned about basically the weakening or the degeneration of the traditions, with all sorts of kind of worldly aspects filtering into it, and people kind of keeping their eye off the ball, so to speak, and getting too involved in one thing or another. So they came up with what we call the Nundro, the go before, it means. But it's not like a beginner practice. When it says go before, it sounds like that, but this is the go before the Tantra, entering the Tantra. And it consists of the outer Nundro and the inner Nundro. The outer Nundro is also called the four thoughts that turn the mind towards Dharma. And I've always found it extremely helpful and clarifying to explain this to people, because it's first the precious human body, this meditation and recognition of just how rare our precious human situation, not just a mere human, but a human that has certain foundations and capabilities and wonderful opportunity, really. You can go through those 18 different factors that they list classically, and you can see, oh my goodness, my life seems to be falling apart, but I have all of these 18. So it's tremendously positive, because this is the most advantageous platform from which to realize our true nature, from which to attain to Buddhahood, better than the God realms. The right mix of suffering, precious human birth, the right mix of suffering, so you're motivated to do something, and yet leisure, so you're able to work on your mind. Now, that's the precious human birth. And then the next thought that turns the mind to Dharma in the outer Nundro is impermanence. So here we have this great opportunity, but oh my goodness, it's not going to last. So deep and extensive meditation into the actually permanent situation that we find ourselves in. And the next is cause and effect. And then after that, the suffering nature of samsara, or the faults of samsara. What are the faults of unenlightened existence? So again, you have a very thorough understanding, and this immediately gives benefit. Because, if you're going around like worldly beings do, and is our habit of doing, of thinking that everything should be perfect, then when it's not perfect, we have even a deeper suffering, because it's like we've been betrayed. On top of things just being what they are, you broke your arm, you have this additional suffering suffering on the top of suffering, they call it, where it shouldn't be this way. So we're going through mental suffering in that way too, instead of just the suffering of a broken arm. So these are the four thoughts. Now, the Geluk, I don't know the Gelugpa tradition, but in this exposition, which Geshe Nelwyn Dargay is doing, he goes, we did last time the three lower realms. So it was more emphasis on just the three lower realms of existence, and naturally wanting to be not there. So he's describing hellish, we went through great detail, cold hells, hot hells, then the pretas, the hungry ghosts, and the animal realm. So I thought I'd just top that off a little bit today by going through the in the Torch of Certainty, Jamgon Kongtrul's sort of outline of the faults of samsara, because they're a nice kind of summary and rather succinct. So here we go. Shortcomings of samsara, especially to get kind of the quality of what's the kind of like nub of each one of these states of existence. And of course, this works for the mental uh, level of mind that creates these too. So first, the hell beings. For those born in the 8 hot hells, all the mountains and valleys are blazing red hot iron. The rivers and lakes are molten copper and bronze. The trees send a rain of swords and other sharp weapons. The inhabitants enjoy not a moment's rest, but are incessantly slaughtered by wild beasts and horrible demons. Life in the Avishi hell is the most intensely painful of all. Even the Bhagavan, that's the world honored one, cannot bear to speak of its miseries. For it is said, when he does, the merciful bodhisattvas vomit blood and come dangerously close to death. So those are the 8 hot hells. Then the 8 cold hells. For those born in the cold hells, all the mountains and valleys are snow and ice. Due to the bitterly cold winds and storms, their bodies are covered with tiny cracks. And even before their billion-year life is over, they die again and again, only to be instantly reborn and undergo the same suffering once more. Now, there's the reality of these realms. So within the terminology sometimes gets a little bit confusing for people. I don't know if it's different in Sanskrit and Tibetan, but in English, we talk about the 3 realms, which are the formless realm, the realm of subtle form, and then the desire realm. But within the desire realm, additionally, we talk about the 6 realms, the sensual gods, the fighting gods, human beings, animals, hungry ghosts, and hellish beings. So that's what we're talking about here. But when you see these descriptions, what's always interesting to me is that you can obviously apply it to your own mind, right as we are as a human being. I mean, for instance, the cold hells, it's interesting to me that the Buddhists, talk about the hot hells. We're kind of used to that from our own culture, where things are just intensely angry, hatred, hot, but also the cold hells. And to me, this has always seemed to be a rather remarkable description of depression, because it's like hatred, but it's inward directed instead of outward directed. So anyway, I've always found this helpful. And as Geshe Nawang Darge noted in last week also, then there's the miscellaneous hells. The miseries experienced by those in the occasional or neighboring hells are as bad as the rest. And that's all Jamgon Kongtrul had to say about it. So next is spirits. It says spirits in this book, this translation, but we were saying pretas or hungry ghosts. The spirits cannot find any food or drink. Increasingly tormented by hunger and thirst, but finding only mucus and feces, they are wearied by their hopeless search. Naked, they burn in summer and freeze in winter. When it rains, live coals fall and burn them. They see water as pus. Flames shoot from their dislocated joints. They continually fight and beat each other, each one thinking the other is enemy. They may live for 15,000 human years. And of course, we're in these terrible states of want. Doesn't it feel like it's 15,000 years? So next is the animals. Animals in the sea are as crowded as grains of malting barley. They survive by eating each other. Constantly tormented by fear, they wander about, carried by waves. Even animals who live in more spacious mountain habitats are unhappy, always fearing some enemy's approach. They kill each other. Even the domesticated ones are hitched to plows or killed for meat and hides, and they are stupid. In addition to the misery of stupidity, they suffer as much from heat and cold as do the hell beings and spirits. So that aligns with what we were talking about last week in Geshe Nawang Darge's discussion of the 3 lower realms. But the 4 thoughts now, this 4th thought continues with the 3 higher realms in the realm of desire. So he starts with the gods. Gods of the desire realm are distracted by the pleasant lives they lead and do not think about the Dharma. 7 god days before their lives are over, they perceive 5 different death omens. They see their future birthplaces in the hells and elsewhere and experience the misery of their own downfall, like fish writhing on hot sand. When they have exhausted their store of good deeds, even the gods of the four dhyanas, these are the four meditative stabilizations, even the gods of the four dhyanas and the formless realm experience a weakening of samadhi and gradually fail. So they have heightened mental powers, but they're not applying it with bodhicitta, and therefore this intense mind discovery of your true nature, you might say. Rather, they're just distracted by the good things that are happening. And we can see this in our lives too. You know, when everything's going good, somehow Dharma can kind of go out the window. You're just having too much good time. The mind is distracted. Next is the Ashuras, or the fighting gods. Since Ashuras are naturally envious of the splendor of the desire gods, they do nothing but fight with them. Their accumulated merit is weak, and they dislike the Dharma. They are defeated in battle and suffer intense pain when slaughtered. So you can think of types of existences where you have everything, but you're not satisfied. And so you're fighting with others. There's jealousy of the ones that seem to be higher mental states, seem to have things better, more easily just being applied to them. So in the wheel of samsara, you know, the Ashura realm has a tree planted in it, and that the crown of the tree is in the realm of the desire gods, and so all these fruits that are ripening for the desire gods effortlessly to eat. They've done nothing but just pick off this tree and eat these wonderful fruits. And the Ashura gods are down there. They can see all their fruit being eaten by the desire gods who didn't do anything for it. And so they're always like having battles, but they're always losing. And then finally, the human realm. The misery of birth in the human realm resembles that of a little bird carried off by a hawk. The misery of aging is like that of a mother camel losing her calf. The misery of illness is like that of a guilty man going to prison. The misery of death is like that of a man pursued by an executioner. Each of these includes the 5 kinds of misery. So let's do that again. The misery of birth in the human realm is like a little bird carried off by a hawk. The misery of aging is like a mother camel losing her calf. The misery of illness is like a guilty man going to prison. The misery of death is like a man pursued by an executioner. And Jamgon Kotro makes the point, each of these includes the 5 kinds of misery. So to give you an idea, the 5 miseries of birth, due to the violent pain which accompanies it, birth entails the misery of being born. Because anyone who is born has sown the seeds of conflicting emotions. So we come into this world as a human being, and our afflictive emotions come with it. 2, birth may entail the misery of receiving a low status. Because of old age, sickness, and death come after it. 3, birth is the ground for suffering, because the conflicting emotions gradually expand and we accumulate actions, karma. And 4th, birth is the ground for the conflicting emotions. Because of momentariness and impermanence. 5, birth implies the misery of being powerless in the face of destruction. So to give you an idea how they use these 5 miseries, then the 5 miseries of aging, for instance, those were the 5 miseries of birth, but in aging, fading of the complexion, deterioration of the form, dissipation of energy, impairment of the senses, and decline of wealth. Welcome to aging. Now, the 5 miseries of illness: the increase of frustration and anxiety in illness, the body's natural changes, the inability to enjoy pleasant things, the need to rely on what is unpleasant, like medicine, and the approaching separation from life. Those are the 5 miseries of illness. And now the 5 miseries of death: separation from wealth, separation from influence, separation from attendants and friends, and separation even from your own body, and then violent anguish. And then the misery of not finding what you seek, although you strive so hard for it that you lose all regard for the injury, suffering, or malicious talk you inflict on others. You do not obtain the food, money, or fame you desire. This is the misery of not finding what you seek. And then there's the misery of not retaining what you have, dreading the approach of an enemy, thief, or violent robber, being left with only the stars for a hat and the frost for boots, being exhausted from too much work, worrying about your ability to protect your dependents, and worrying that your enemies will not be punished. This is the misery of not retaining what you have. Something that strikes me in these too, I mean, he's very succinct in these, just listing these kinds of things. But of course, when we study these and we contemplate them, and then we kind of, incorporate them into our worldview, of course, it results in compassion for others because you can see these things in other beings. Instead of just being, from moment to moment to moment, obsessed with ourself and our mind states and what we want, what we don't want, what we're fearing, you start to be able to see that in other beings. Now, the attachment is still there, of course, but this is the genius of the path. Because let's say in something like generosity or giving, it's still all mixed up with all sorts of, I mean, we see this, someone gives money to a college, but they want their nameplate on the building. And even if you're doing something anonymously, people praise themselves for being anonymous. It's still kind of attachment there. So we're really stuck in this way. But yet, when you're doing that kind of giving, you're like corroding that iron, like Rinpoche's the iron shackles of self-grasping. So things are becoming weaker and weaker and weaker. And basically the mind is opening up, and then there's more chance to see the light shining. But nonetheless, then there's the misery of separation from what is dear, the loss of essential persons, parents, siblings, servants, students, and so on. And then there's the decline in wealth and power, which is separation from what's dear, the loss of a large sum of money, anxiety about slander you have incurred through bad deeds or another's jealousy. This is the misery of separation from what is dear. Matarchan said somewhere that one of the last attachments to go is this, pride of reputation. Actually, I don't think it was Lama Tarchan. Actually, I think that comes from, I think it's an AA statement from AA, that you can have someone whose life is really falling apart because of their, addiction to drink, for instance. And yet, there are examples of like surgeons. The last thing that goes is their reputation. In other words, they're really focused and doing a good job in the surgery, but of course they're horrible to everyone working with them and completely arrogant and with their families and everything. But they cling, we cling to this self-reputation. And so everything goes into making sure that you're still competent with your job or however the public is viewing you. And then finally, the misery of encountering the undesirable. So we got separation from what we like, and now we got involvement with what we don't like. Encountering illness, encountering dangerous enemies, encountering the arm of the law, encountering a murderer, encountering a bad reputation, evil rumors, or incurring punishment in return for help, having lazy servants, and so on. This is the misery of encountering the undesirable. Now, those 8 categories that we just went of misery pertain chiefly to human beings. So again, we can read through these and understand them and see them in our lives. And of course, sometimes, people cover over certain kinds of situations just because it's too painful. So you just don't want to look there, and people suppress stuff all the time. I remember as a kid, my mother made a dentist appointment for me in 3rd grade, 4th grade, I can't remember. Maybe it was 6th grade, but at any rate, it was, grade school, elementary school. And I walked to school, And the dentist's office was about the same distance, but in a different direction from home. But she set it all up for me, had this appointment. I was going to walk at the end of school, walk to the dentist and do my appointment. Completely suppressed it. I just walked home and she said, "What are you doing here?" So we do that. So again, the power of the mind is that it's illuminating. It's knowing. It's clear. It has clarity. And so in an intellectual way, it kind of leads us, to show us where we've covered things up even. So it's very helpful because we see all of these things and we can contemplate, obviously, in our own lives, these kinds of situations. And then just by habituating the mind to an awareness of these miseries, then you start to see it more easily in others. And of course, with that seeing is what? Wisdom, understanding. Wisdom and compassion are the same. There's idiot compassion, but real compassion is infused with wisdom. What is appropriate? What is skillful? And sometimes, like with a great teacher or something, this can seem a surprise. Kempo was talking last night about the story of Angulimala. He knew the name. This person in ancient India who had like an evil guru. And the guru told him, if you killed people, if you killed 100 people, you would go immediately to heaven. So he was going around killing people and making mala. He was making a mala of their fingers. So he wore around his neck these 99 fingers, 99 people he had killed. This is the story. And then he needed one more, right? And he just happened to see the Buddha standing over in a place. And so that was going to be that was his intention, was to have his 100th victim be the Buddha. So how do you react in a situation like that? Well, all of us, a certain level of understanding, a certain amount of power, you might say, just through compassion, but it's limited. We don't have to pretend. It's all right to see our faults. We do as much as we can. We give, but the important thing on giving, the good karmic effect is if it's not stingy. So you want to be able to give what a person is meaningful to them or accepts. So we just don't give, you don't, and that's also beneficial. So you don't give a flamethrower to a 13-year-old boy, But at the same time, you can't be stingy. So again, Lama Tarchan is taught, and this is why the bowl offerings, practicing the 6 perfections, we're giving water. It's so wonderful because no one's stingy with water. It's pure. We like it. It has all sorts of benefits for washing, cleansing, swimming, everything. And everybody likes it. A cat came in last night, went right to her water dish and just sat there drinking until she was satisfied. So water's pure. And we can imagine it to be anything, but we're not stingy with water. So we get in the habit. Lama Tarchan would also say, just, get in the habit of giving from your left hand to your right hand and back and forth, because no one's stingy is attached to one hand as opposed to the other as far as giving. And so you have the habit going. It's a little bit stronger and stronger and stronger. So those are the 8 categories of misery pertaining chiefly to human beings, but then there are 3 types of misery common to all samsaric beings. First is the misery of misery itself. In brief, miseries experienced by beings in the lower realms, in the pain of disease, malicious gossip, etc., experienced by gods and men, constitute the misery of misery itself. Next is the misery of change. When you lead a wealthy, peaceful existence, life seems very pleasant, but soon, because of impermanence, the misery of change arrives. Then there's the misery of all conditioned existence. The 2 kinds of misery mentioned above, that's the misery of misery itself, the fact of misery, and the misery of change, are grounded in the fact that the 5 skandhas have come together. This is the misery latent in all conditioned existence. Finding their foothold in the 5 skandhas. 5 skandhas is basically body and mind. We have body and mind together, these 4 qualities of mind we can get into later, but finding their foothold in the 5 skandhas. So this is the misery of conditioned existence. like inherent. The many kinds of misery of the three realms arise. Thus, no matter how high or low your state of birth, you cannot avoid samsara's very nature. The three types of misery. Even if your life seems happy and you possess a healthy body, a house, money, food, friends, servants, these are mainly misery in disguise. And this is the profundity of the Buddha's teaching, because it's said that, for ordinary beings, we experience suffering like someone slanders you, someone disrespects you, you fall down and stub your knee. I mean, these are the miseries that we all expect, but there's also this subtle misery that we don't. The very nature that we're in a situation that is actually imperfect, you might say. It's said that the bodhisattva experiences that. A normal person, if you have the normal misery of conditioned existence, is kind of like a hair in the palm of your hand. You don't feel it. We can develop that kind of sensitivity, but we don't ordinarily have it as born as a human being. So you have a hair in the palm of your hand. You're not even aware of that kind of misery. But for the bodhisattva, and again, 100 levels of bodhisattvas, but for the great bodhisattvas, it's like that hair is stuck in their eye. They can't ignore it. So they are aware all the time. They're like food offered to a nauseated man or a hangman's feast for a condemned prisoner. Turn your back on longing, root out attachment, destroy desire for conditioned existence from its foundation, reflect on the great blessings of liberation. This is the opposite of thinking about samsara's shortcomings. Then energetically apply the methods for achieving enlightenment. And then he gets into the methods, but that's to fill out last week when we were talking about the three lower realms, the suffering of the lower realms, which is important, but of course, very important to recognize the suffering of the three higher realms, because then we stop this hope that there's going to be some refuge. If I can only get into a heavenly state, if somehow I end up with great power and wealth and reputation and all of these things, kind of like a false refuge. So this understanding is, these are like the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. In the future, we'll see turning to refuge in this opening of the door of practice, entering the path. It's like these four foundations are like, I saw today, because it's such an interesting time of year, I think, when the leaves are not out yet, and we're heading towards the equinox. So suddenly, we're aware that spring is coming. You get an occasional warm day, and the light, the sun is higher in the sky, and the light is longer during the day. So, our bodies just feel this kind of evolution change going on. And so you find yourself looking at trees. And it's interesting because the trees are completely exposed because the leaves are gone, right? But somehow during the winter, speaking for myself, I'm not looking at the trees. But when there's this possibility that maybe the leaves are coming again, I just find myself, without thinking about it, looking at the trees. And there they are, this solid trunk, this foundation that they have. And as they go up, it gets finer and finer and finer until these very fine, like twigs, and the crown, which is where the exchange of energy takes place. That's where the contact to the light, and above those, it just becomes invisible, right? But that's where the action is. That's where the sun and the leaves themselves, the photosynthesis happening. And I thought to myself, it's really like the Dharma. What's so great about this is the fullness of the Dharma, that it's complete. We're just all very natural. You're in some sort of a state that's dissatisfactory, and you hear some aspect of the Dharma that sounds wonderful. And of course, in the beginning, the motivation is really self-improvement or some sort of happiness or calmness, and then eventually grows into self-liberation. But with the discovery of the Mahayana, it becomes the liberation of all. How mind-boggling that is. Yeah, Keen's remembering this story that they say that the suffering that the desire gods experience when they see, because they're enhanced mental powers. They're up there just chasing distractions. Everything's wonderful. I mean, they communicate by music. Their sexual congress is just by glance and moving their eyebrows. Nothing so gross as embracing someone. So they live in this extremely refined. They're all wearing flowers. I mean, everything is just like it couldn't be better. Pastel colors. But then it said when they get towards the end of their life, suddenly the flowers start to smell and start to wilt, the flowers that they're wearing, and their bodies start to smell. And so the other gods are totally grossed out by that, and so they have the pain of being excluded. But then, because they have developed these higher mental powers, which can come and go, but nonetheless, at this point, they're able to see where they're going to be reborn, and they've totally blown it as far as not practicing bodhicitta, not doing anything for anybody else, just kind of sporting in their own desires. And so they can see, and often they can be born in a hellish place. It's said that recognition is the sharpest pain of samsara. So I think, though, about this foundation, it's so important because as the tree goes up and up, it gets finer and finer and finer, the wood, until just these twigs at the top. And that's where this energetic exchange and creativity is happening. Of course, it's happening in the trunk too, but we don't see it. It's like coarse. And then beyond, can you imagine sort of relating to the moisture in the air that you don't even see, and the sunlight, which you can't even see until it hits you and you feel the warmth of it. This is so much as it strikes me. This is the Dharma. These fundamental teachings are so important because you're grounded in how things actually are. Even though we have a limited view in samsara with all our attachments and self-aggrandizement and fears and all of the afflictions, still we're seeing things how samsara really is. And of course, that's our reality. So instead of hiding from how things are, we're seeing how we really experience them, how they really are there. And then this is the hard thing, the faults of samsara. We want to kid ourselves. We want to see, if only I could be somewhere else, if only I'd been born in a different body, if only I was in a different country, whatever, all these things. These are all searching for, in a way, it's good. We're feeling the dissatisfaction, but we haven't seen the universal nature of it. We certainly haven't seen the suffering of conditioned existence itself. And of course, with our limited view, it appears like that's all there is. So we have like terror, the idea of the seemingly extinction of this separate ego. So this dissatisfaction can lead us to a discovery of the Dharma, because here there are all sorts of religions out there, but it's only the Dharma that starts with this recognition of the nature of dissatisfaction, the nature of suffering. It's pardon? Well, it depends how you look at it. But it's a religion from our human standpoint. Why? Because it's more than just a psychology, and it has teachings of what, although it's here with us right now, like one Zen master said, this very body, the body of Buddha, this very land is the Pure Land, but we don't see it that way. So to us, it seems like the Pure Land is something transcendent. And one Chinese monk asked his master, is the Pure Land really real? And the master said to him, look around. Is all this real? And he said, yes. And the master said the Pure Land is even more real. So there are states of vividness, of clarity, of when the mind is stilled, truly stilled, the Pure Land appears. So this teaching, this is very hard for a lot of Western Buddhists. People don't want to hear any kind of transcendent thing. They don't want to hear about Pure Land. Somehow it bothers them. It's thinking like some sort of theological corruption or something. It's more easy to believe in our own kind of psychological advancement, where it's going to benefit my life, but it's a one lifetime type of thinking. It's the greatness. Why do all this so you can be a little bit calmer in your life? That's nice, but it's very hard to continue with the sacrifices that come with the Dharma. So this transcendent idea is really important because it makes us all complete. And the thing is, nobody is able to give up that, at least in an unconscious way. So, for instance, because we have limited understanding, even if you're a materialist, there's some invisible thing that somehow you believe in. It's so interesting to me. I mean, people come up with all sorts of ideas of utopias where if we can only get everyone going in the right direction, we're going to be there. Or there are negative things like, racial supremacy. I mean, we come up with these goblins. And why? Because we need that feeling of completion, of whole and complete, which is our true nature. So somehow when we're not whole and complete, we feel it. This is the first noble truth. And so what do? If we don't have proper insight into this, or the teachings guiding us at least on the path away from the distractions and everything else, our mind projects, creates something that is kind of like transcendent, giving meaning to our lives. So it's right there, but it's just whether we're doing it in the right way or the wrong way. And the genius of the Dharma is that this is 2,600 years. People have been walking this path. So you can have confidence in it. The other thing that's wonderful is that it doesn't say, don't have any doubts. Just believe this because I say so. Believe this because, look, 2,600 years, look how great the Buddha was. Get in line. It's not like that. We're encouraged to investigate our doubts because we're dealing with reality, our true nature, which is not false. It's valid. We don't have to be afraid of looking into our hesitations, our doubts, our disbeliefs. This is the practice. So these practices, these teachings on the four thoughts are extremely important. One Lama once told us that, he wished that his students could spend 6 months meditating on the four thoughts. But in the modern world, pretty much not impossible. Even in the Tibetan world, there's always limited resources and not like it used to be, I guess. But nonetheless, it still shows the value of the four thoughts and the understanding that comes. Why? Because it's like that tree trunk. We want to be up there with the fine twigs, doing the photosynthesis and all the good stuff. But that doesn't happen except for that trunk that's sort of reaching to the sky, you might say. But it's just one tree. So it's just a matter of how subtle our understanding is. The greatness is that even with conviction, once these things start making sense, and then especially, the interactions with a teacher, not like me, but I mean like Gar Rinpoche, it's inspiring in unexpected ways and completely natural ways, completely unfabricated ways, nothing that you could even tell somebody else. And yet, this is very helpful because you start having confidence in methods and practices that otherwise you wouldn't, that seem to be, beyond. You have like a leap of faith. And that's not bad. That's not bad. It's actually very good. If that is based on your own experience, if it's based on the Dharma, if it's based on the questioning and the checking that you've done, again, the sincere kind of investigation. This is totally positive. And so you start to see that, we divide the teachings between the path of perfection, the six perfections, leading to the perfection of wisdom, like it's going up, 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 up. But then there's the path of the Tantra, which is you take that highest view from the beginning and like you're looking down. So all the six perfections are happening in you because you are a Buddha already. And what's hard for people to understand or believe, because we don't have, a whole body of people out there who have, Dharma is very new, especially the tantric Dharma in the West. But if people persist, I mean, the path of the Tantra is the path of transformation. You are transforming yourself into what you already are, a Buddha. And we're given great help because these visions of these Buddhas have come from deep enlightenment of great masters. It's not something manufactured by some clever guy or woman. And so these forms are sacred. And what does sacred mean? Well, it's like, it's like the Pure Land, something transcendent. In a way, it's not really transcendent because it's here right now in our nature. But at the same time, it appears as if transcendent because we're so stuck in our attachments and distractions that in comparison, it seems similarly with sacred. In a sense, our nature is sacred in itself, but it is effective. It is skillful to regard some things as sacred because actually they do have power in relation to our ordinary consciousness. So a seed syllable, for instance, is the Buddha itself. And to meditate on that seed syllable, it's superior object of meditation as opposed to meditating on a rock. You can do great things by meditating on a rock, calming your mind down, and eventually coming into true insight, vipassana. But to meditate from the get-go on a seed syllable, if you can have that confidence in it, you can be doing weeks and weeks and years of what seems to be fruitless kind of practice. You're supposed to be visualizing and there ain't nothing there. And you're just wrestling with your own negative thoughts. All of that is positive. You're not trying to indulge in your attachments, but there it goes. It's happening all the time. And people can get very discouraged because they say, oh, there's just no advancement. But if you keep this up, and what does it matter? If it takes years, that's all right. There's benefit. The whole thing is meritorious. And all of that merit is in your mind stream, which when the gross attachments to our body happen at death, that's there. There's no wasted in cause and effect. The Buddha called it the iron law of cause and effect. So we can have faith. And when you feel some degree of transformation yourself, when your mind is calmed down to some degree where, it can take, years, but it's just sort of, you see you can see the transformation of the mind, that there's just more of a sense that the seed syllable is there. And there's more of a sense that the deity, that you are the deity, even though it's a very vague kind of thing, but yet it's stable. So that gives one, and this is one of the great powers of the Tantra, because if you're just meditating, on the mind, it's hard to see progress in a way. But the greatness of these forms is that we're able to relate to these forms, even though they're subtle, like cumulus clouds, as opposed to dirt and rocks and things that we can touch. So they're wispy kind of forms because they're mind generated, but yet it allows us, I think. So it's very, very helpful. It makes sense to me, that the Tibetans say that the tantric practice is like the most effective practice for our particular time, a particular time when the mental afflictions are very strong, and virtue and non-virtue are kind of topsy-turvy. So many people see virtuous things as being non-virtuous, and they see non-virtuous things as being virtuous. We're so confused. We're so upside down. And we don't have that kind of natural kind of support and encouragement that, a community could have. So this is the great importance of of a Dharma center and all the teachings, and especially the lamas who come here to visit here, because for a moment you can sort of step into that world, not different than this world, but there's support, you know, there's, yeah, wonderful, wonderful. It's the practice, it's more effective, it's more meritorious, it's affecting more people. It's more of a natural kind of relaxation of our self-clinging. And that allows our true nature to shine. Uh, okay, so yeah, absolutely. Uh-huh. Um, yeah, Dharma activities is anything having to do with the Dharma, but Bodhisattva activities are activities that are motivated even in just a mere conceptual way for the benefit of others, self and others, both together. Any activities that are on the path to Buddhahood. Um, and yeah, like you can't tell. I forgot to tell the story. I finished about Angulimala to show you the tremendous skillfulness. So Angulimala, here's one last murder he needed, right? And he sees the Buddha standing off in the distance. Kempo told this story last night or 2 nights ago. And so Angulimala was all fired up because here he was going to have his 100th finger that he could put around his neck, and then he would go to a heavenly realm. So he was really pumped. So he started running at the Buddha, and the Buddha, in his great skillfulness, just stood there. But the more Angulimala ran, he didn't get any closer. And so finally, this totally frustrated him that he did prostrations to Buddha, and he said, "What's going on here? Basically, you were kept floating away from me." He says, "No, I was just standing here. I never moved." So, I interpret this to see, well, he was showing Angulimala the unreality of his projected mind and the solidity of appearances in that. So he was deeply shook. Eventually, he became a monk. And Kempo mentioned he's actually one of the arhats. He came to full self-liberation. So this kind of skillfulness, again, the unity of wisdom and compassion, hard for us to see. So when we practice on the path of the perfections, skillful, we separate wisdom and compassion because that's how it appears to us as two different things. But this objectless compassion is wisdom. But the skillful nature of the manifestation of it depends on one's level of realization. And a great figure like the Buddha, can do extraordinary things like that. But for us, we're working on it. And we try, but then we do things wrong. Sometimes you think you're helping someone and you tell them what's going on, and they don't hear what you're saying, even if you're saying what's correct. They just hear your emotional tone behind it, or they imagine some sort of subtle arrogance that you're talking down to them, and then they're fighting that. Or they think you're coming from below them and you're right, and then they feel bad because they're a lesser person. I mean, it's so difficult dealing with human beings. Human beings are inherently annoying. They're inherently attached. They're inherently, like Aristotle said, uh, the shortest lived human emotion is gratitude. So it's a tremendous challenge. And why? Because of samsara. But the good thing for us is that we have methods that when we fail, what do? Well, you know, we we take the bodhisattva vow again. That's picking ourselves up. There's so much wisdom in the prostrations we do. You're always you're taking this vow and going down. It's like a renunciation, and then you're getting yourself back up when you're taking the bodhisattva vow, and it's just inculcating this in us, this habituation. And Lord, amazing, it works. This is the incredible thing. Again, you hear me say all the time, I grab some basketball player like Michael Jordan, my era, or LeBron James, I guess. Yeah. They're doing it a million times. And finally, it's like it's seemingly perfectly natural and perfectly fluid. And then they have some obstacle, they go around it without thinking. But it's all that training again and again and again and again and again. So gom, to grow accustomed to. Yeah, Tibetan for meditation is gom, means to grow accustomed to.
Tony Robbins said, he said that the only thing I walked away with is repetition is the mother of skill.
Repetition is the mother of skill. Thank you. I wonder a couple of things from Gar Rinpoche, just to end tonight, and then we'll pick up more next week. But this is his introduction to his book on Vajrakalaya. Said, for some years, I've been sharing at Dharma centers whatever knowledge I have about the practice of Vajrakila, he says. With rejoicing, I offer thanks to the Tara Foundation for having collected these instructions and provided for their assembly, allowing Arima to translate and arrange. On account of my inferior intellect and meager study, I certainly lack the refined exposition capable of arousing delight in the learned. Even so, Vajrakumara, another name for Vajrakalaya, Vajrakumara is the chief personal deity of my paternal ancestors. Likewise, since successive generations at Gar Monastery have practiced Vajrakumara accomplishment retreats, and since his routine pujas came to be important there, I have relied on him as the destined deity with whom I have had an auspicious connection for lifetimes through karma and aspirations. As I have had the good fortune to practice Vajrakumara even from the time I was small, herein I have related whatever I could, with nothing but the intent to benefit others, based on the certainty associated with his felt blessing, and on the slight experience I have gained. If masters of the learned, who have a broad knowledge of Sutra and Tantra, should opine on developing the good and rooting out the fault of these teachings, I will be most grateful. That attitude. And then one more paragraph in this discussion of Sutra, conventional path of bodhicitta, using our conventional dualistic mind, but training, going higher, 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 higher to the perfection of wisdom, and then to the Tantra, which starts out with the pure vision. It's like yeshe. So there's my old mind is going. There is prajna. I'm forgetting the Tibetan words, but there's prajna, which is again the perfection of our dualistic wisdom. And then there is, starting with conceptual, but then there is jnana, the inerrant wisdom, yeshe in Tibetan. So we have that complete wisdom from the beginning and are kind of like incorporating everything immediately into that wisdom. So at first it's like pretend, but that's all right because it's actually true. All right. So he's saying it is taught, excuse me, it is taught that after cultivating precious bodhicitta and training in the progressive stages of the path, one can enter the door of the secret mantra Vajra vehicle. So understand this. The Tantra is not something other than the Sutra. It's that Sutra is that foundation. If the four foundations are the foundation of the tree, the perfection of wisdom, even more so. Teachings on emptiness, great bodhicitta, that is completely have to be there when entering the Tantra. All right. So one can enter the door of the secret mantric Vajra vehicle, first receiving empowerment, then transmission, and finally practice instructions. This mode of spiritual development is fundamentally relational in its approach. It depends on the human connection between the guru and disciple. Indeed, this is how Garchen Rinpoche, sorry, this is the translator speaking. Indeed, this is how Garchen Rinpoche and countless other realized lineage masters were gradually initiated into the mantra path. Now, as ever, practitioners who aspire to become like them would do well to emulate their approach to the teachings. Because Garchen Rinpoche's actions are shaped by both extreme love and extreme pragmatism, they can sometimes be unorthodox and difficult to fathom. Ever cognizant of how fleeting human life is and how rare the conditions are to meet with and receive the sublime Dharma, Rinpoche fulfills without delay the wishes of those who approach him with interest. He offers lovingly and in good faith that which he has received. These are tremendous blessings. And something that's very wonderful about the Tantra, when it is enclosed in this loving mind and this faithful mind, the mind that is not seeking to increase our own sort of attachment and specialness, but rather is motivated by bodhicitta, then the blessings come and the blessings are seen in their right light. They're completely encouraging. And yet, if you go to a teacher with, some sort of special experience or something, they'll say, very good, use it for encourage your faith, deepen your faith, and then burn it. You don't try to recreate anything. We're not seeking special experiences. We're seeking Buddhahood. We're seeking the liberation of all. And that is pure and purifying. Okay, so next week we'll start with renunciation in the chapter 6 in the Tibetan tradition of mental development. Keen, did you have a question? No, sorry.
Probably do, but that's all.
I thought you were emotional.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for asking.
Okay, see if I can find a dedication in here. I always try and I somehow never find them. Well, we'll do our own again. May the merit from this evening, the wisdom generated by hearing the teachings, and the great wish of compassion for all, the final resolution of all pain, suffering, and death. May all of that have arisen, be dedicated to all motherly sentient beings. May we never forget the sacrifice that others have made so that we can just be here like we are, that we can even be born, and the great debt of gratitude that we have to all the motherly sentient beings. May each and every last one be free. Swaha. Okay. Okay.
Encore.
Encore. Mm-hmm.